Well, my name is Dale Sherman. I'm the author of the new book about Kiss called The Kiss Back, and that will be out in stores and online through online stores, of course, in fall 2012. And the book, of course, is about all that's left to know about the hottest band in the land. And as you can see here, we're going to be talking a little bit with Bill Starkey, who wrote the introduction to the book and also wrote a brief chapter about how the Kiss Army started. And as you can see here, I got my notes on the clipboard. So I got everything set here to ask some questions. But for the most part, and to mention early in the book, the purpose of the book really is to go over types of topics that members of the Kiss Army usually discuss at the bar after a Kiss Expo. The type of thing that commonly gets missed in other biographies and reference guides about the band. And I think this podcast is a chance for us to talk about the band, and a good chance for the two of us who have been involved in fandom for a very long time, according to Bill, forever basically with Kiss, and myself, early 80s. And just talk about a few things we know about the band, about fandom, and things like that. So, Bill, now you give the story in your foreword about how the Kiss Army really got created. And it's a great story, but I'd like to read that for readers to find out on their own. However, I am curious to know what attracted you to become a fan of the band in the first place.
Well, I was a fan of a lot of the rock and roll acts as a teenager in the Midwest, from the early 70s, from the Beatles to Alice Cooper. But I was also a fan of the glam rock English bands like Slade, Mott the Hoople, Bowie. And for me, Kiss was the band that brought all the best qualities of all my favorite bands together as one. And initially I enjoyed the music, but once I saw them live, even though they were considered an opening act the times I'd seen them, sometimes third, fourth on the bill, I knew that I saw something special, and that's what drew me into the band that way.
Okay. I think for myself, just to give you my side of it, I think a lot of it that drew me to the band was dealing with just not only the music but also the visual side of it. As a person who kind of like Paul Stanley, in a sense, a lot of people didn't know this until very recently about Paul having a hearing problem. I've had hearing problems as well most of my life. And so I've always been more attracted to the visual side of bands like Alice Cooper, Meatloaf, Queen, things like that. And I think that may actually point a bit to why Paul himself is probably more involved with kind of a visual look to things. You think?
Yeah, definitely. Image is very important to the band, and how they look, and in the uniformity of the band and all that. Like I said, they were brought together all the qualities I saw of all the other bands. It wasn't a hodgepodge of musicians. They were very uniform look about them.
And I think that a lot of the visual stuff does play into what makes the band kind of bigger than life and more interesting. But it is kind of a catch-22 in a sense, because we as fans also have to fight against those who say, "Whoa, it's just because of the visuals that you're interested in."
Right.
Now we'll talk a little bit more about the Kiss Army here. Because of your status as helping set up the Kiss Army as the official fan club for the band, you spent time with them just as they were really breaking through. What were they like back at that time?
Well, even though they had this dangerous reputation early on, I was surprised how professional they were and respectful. Because at that time, they scared a lot of parents. So, they didn't live up to that bad boy image for me. I mean, I was invited to parties and things like that, and it always impressed me how Gene and Paul always, abstained from drinking, smoking, drugs, and it had a big influence on me. And they were just very professional. And see, I can't make any comparisons because they were the only band I had met, but talking with other people in the industry who had other bands come through Terre Haute, they made the same. They had the same opinion that they were surprised how professional they were and how respectful and I mean, they didn't look the part that they conveyed to like most of the general public. So, you know, that I think was something that really impressed me. I mean, and to this day, they that's why they're still around. You know, I mean, they didn't fall into the pitfalls that happened to rock stardom. Now, of course, there were women everywhere, but you know that didn't do them in. So you know.
Now you mentioned, of course, just a second ago that you didn't really see anybody else but Kiss when it came to a band like that.
Right.
Now, of course, you were kind of there at the beginning where a lot of bands considered the band starting to break apart a little bit. Did you get any sense of that, and did you feel like, oh, well, any kind of infighting normal or anything like that?
None. But then again, they were very image conscious to the point, you know, when I was allowed access to certain things, that if there were anything like that, it was really hidden well. But honest to God, I mean, I never heard any complaining or anything about each other. Or, I mean, they were still coming to grips with being headliners, and I'll never forget that one time that instead of doing interviews with Cream and Rolling Stone, I remember stopping and somebody said, "Well, you got an interview with Playboy next," and I'm thinking, "Wow!" I mean, now they're doing interviews with non-music publications and things like that. So they were really just coming into this huge thing where I mean, you were just wondering when was this going to end. So no, I didn't see any fighting at all. I mean, they just it was cool how everybody seemed to get along. Now they were four completely diverse people, but you know, when it came time to going up on stage and performing, it was, you know, they became one. So can't say that I saw anything. No.
Okay. We're kind of getting off the Army track for a second. Now, in the book, I spend a chapter talking about the Kiss merchandise.
Right.
The stuff that came out in the 70s. And of course, that's another factor that fans tend to go back and forth on. Like, well, you know, maybe that helped them get better known household-wise. But also was a deterrent to the band in a sense, too, because it was like all these lunchboxes and dolls and stuff for the little kid. And, you know, you were an adult almost.
Right.
Basically an adult time. Just wondering what you thought about that. Did you see anything?
I saw it from the beginning, because I remember originally we made our own first Kiss t-shirts because we were upset that there weren't any. Matter of fact, when we would go to shows, we thought the shirts that the roadies had on were really cool, that were just these black shirts that had Kiss on the front. We wanted to do something like that. So we made our own Kiss shirts because we wanted to be able to get something like that. So eventually, yeah, I saw the first mass-produced Kiss shirts when Boutwell brought them out, and the belt buckles. But at that time, there were several years going by that's all they really did at the time, that I was associated with the fan club and had any kind of real input with them. And that's all as heavy as it got was the newsletters, and I really liked the newsletters. I wish at that time, see, that was like our little internet, because you didn't know what the band was doing. They came out quarterly.
Right.
They had tour information, and that's about as far as it went. And you know, that's as far as the merchandising that I saw. And maybe the kind of merchandising you're talking about came maybe later in the 70s than the 80s. Mm-hmm. And by that time, I was kind of undecided about the band, because I think once the solo albums came, that kind of caught me off guard. And I didn't care for the solo albums at the time because I was afraid this was kind of a divisive thing. You know, I understood that everybody needed to express themselves, but I was cautious about the solo albums. So I, you know, that was more alarming to me than the merchandising at the time, because I wasn't sure, is this the breakup of the band, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, let's face it, who back in the 70s did solo albums? Mm-hmm. Nobody else did but them, and nobody else could have probably. And you know, so I was probably more alarmed by that than the merchandising.
Okay. And it's kind of getting off some of the questions I have prepared, but you brought up something that I think a lot of fans don't quite know about you, and that's how long you were actually working with the Kiss Army. How long did that last?
maybe three years. They were really great about phone calls, letters, and I was kind of like a consultant. The funny thing about it was that most of the people that were working for the Kiss Army, they were from Elton John's fan club, and many of them even expressed to me that they really didn't even care for the band, which at that time was fighting words to me, because I was kind of real intense fan, and so we eventually came to the center, because eventually some of them attended a show out in LA, and then they wrote back to me and said, well, now we understand why you like them, and we went from there, and even came to the point where they invited me out to LA for a while, and I got to go to the operation and see how things were done and all that. But it was just strictly just a genuine, you're a fan kind of thing, and I mean, it wasn't like I stood in front of products or anything like that, because you know, I was into the music and the image and all that. I wasn't really sure where this was going to go, so you know, that's as far as I got with it. I mean, it was maybe 3 years, so 4 years maybe.
Okay. Do you get people who think that you're still involved somehow?
Oh yeah, yeah. I went to a function, and the Chuck Garrick, I think, who's the bass player for Alice Cooper, the first thing he said to me when he met me, when we were introduced, he said, I never got my $5 Kiss Army membership kit. And I laughed, and I said, that's pretty cool, because I said, I haven't had any involvement with that for a while, but I thought that was cool that he mentioned that you know, when he said, well, this is the Kiss Army guy. Well, you know, I'd like to say that I had something to do with that, but it didn't, you know, I didn't. So, but yeah, you get that kind of stuff. I mean, not as much as you used to, but you know, what do you expect for $5? You know.
Again, we'll be getting back to the question, but you keep bringing up things that I just want to talk to you about. I've noticed kind of a weird thing where when you're a fan and you become professionally involved with the people you're a fan of, sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't work well. What do you think are the advantages in having a fan involved like that, or maybe the disadvantages of having a fan involved?
Well, the advantages are you know that person, and you probably have a certain factor where you know how reliable that person's opinion is. The drawback on that, though, is sometimes artists probably don't like to be told certain things, you know, that this isn't going to work or this will work. So, I mean, it works both ways. I will say this much, it's funny about the KISS world, when fans have been involved in projects, and even if KISS probably didn't want them to be involved, it's turned out for the better, because, I mean, the two guys that are in the band right now, Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer, were KISS fans first. So now you look at their contributions to KISS, I think that's been pretty darn, you know, I mean, so, and that's just the first two things that come into mind is, you know, they were fans first, and now look at their contributions to the band. So, you know, hey.
And somebody like Spiro also.
Oh, yeah, Spiro. I mean, these people, you know, have made great contributions, and I think that if anything, the band should maybe be at more ease about that. That, you know, there's a lot of us that would kill for the band, you know, and so we, you know, it's a funny way to look at it, but you know, of course, fans can turn on you too, and I'm sure that that's what they could say, and so you got to be cautious about, you know, how you're dealing with it, but you can't deny sometimes when a fan wants to show their love for a rock group, you know, how beneficial it may turn out for the band.
Okay, now we'll try to get back to some of the things that I kind of planned to hit. So, one thing I think is interesting, we both represent different decades of KISS fandom, really. Yet saw them in similar moments in their career. You saw them in the 70s when they were basically starting their way up. Well, I really got involved in the band around 82, 83, where the band was really starting to come back after all the stuff that happened with the Elder. Of course, I think anybody watching this knows the kind of downside to that whole unmasked Elder Creatures of the Night period where the band was really struggling. Right. And I was started getting involved in fandom at the time with fanzines and stuff. do you think the hunger to gain attention may have something to do with their work with fandom, because they were deeply involved with you as a fan going into this? And I noticed in the early 80s they became deeply involved in fandom again for a few years, up to like 90, 91. They were really deeply involved with fandom stuff.
Well, I think they realized how much they meant to a lot of fans, and realized what made them famous. I think back in that era, they were trying to be something other than what KISS was, trying to find an audience, not realizing that their audience had never left them. And they also found out how much they meant to so many people. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're still around, because of that connection they've made with certain fans, whether they've signed an autograph at an airport or at a meet and greet or somewhere. They've made that positive, connection that they've probably made a fan for life. So, yeah, I think back in that era, that helped them realize, like they knew that the makeup's what made them famous, or that made them famous, or this made them famous, and they listened to their fans. I think that helped. I mean, that was probably a awakening of some sorts.
Now, you just brought up something and brought up something earlier, so I'll kind of mash them together. The internet in the 1990s really changed how information about the band came out. Like you were saying earlier, you did the little newsletter, basically a thing where, like, here's what they're going to be playing, they might be working on a new album.
Right.
And I remember in the early days of the internet, mid-90s, where Gene actually was trying to get involved a little bit with the KISS Nation thing. Some of the fans out there might remember the KISS Nation whole thing that's going on. Gene would sometimes do emails and get kind of sarcastic and nasty remarks back that, even if you weren't much of a fan, it's kind of like, I'll give the guy a break.
Right.
And do you think that sometimes the band wishes for the earlier days, the good old days, before everything was out on the internet, this very second hit there?
Yeah, I definitely think they wish for the good old days, because things were much simpler. You could control the information. I think they were a little wary of the internet. They might have even been one of the last bands to actually have their own website. Now it's full blown. I think they're still even struggling with the social media. But one of the cool things that I think the band needs to understand is that we already know everything there is to know about the band. I mean, even one of the guys has their own reality show, which some people may doubt it's not reality, but that's really opening up your whole life to the fans. So I don't think that there's anything that's out there that we don't know, other than what your book's going to tell us, of course. But I guess you can equate KISS like with smoking. I mean, as KISS fans, we've always been told that they're bad for us, they're no good, and nothing good can come out of this of being a KISS fan. And we've lived off this for 35 years, and like smoking, we just continue to smoke. And we don't care. I don't care if it's disc jockeys are telling us this, or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or whatever. So I think the band can rest assured that we already know everything pretty much that there is to know about the band. And we don't care. We don't care. I mean, we're still fans. It's just this age of information is nothing to be afraid of. Even if they put up a bad concert review, I've seen them. Don't care. Doesn't stop me from going to the next show. Doesn't stop me, because it just doesn't. We know when, it's just one person's opinion. So, yeah, that's something they're grappling with. But I think eventually they'll figure it out that it's you can't just stop the spread of information. And KISS fans are going to be KISS fans, and nobody's going to tell them, what they should like and what they shouldn't like. So we know everything about the band, right?
Right. Now, one of the things I cover in the book, of course, is I think a fun topic, which is that doing with best and worst album covers.
Right.
what people think are really the best ones, and
Mhm.
ones that are like, man, that could have worked, but it didn't quite come off.
Right.
And I just wanted to get your take on that topic.
I love those first 5 or 6 albums because they were all so diverse, and there was no connection at all in the design work or anything from the first album to Hotter Than Hell to Dress to Kill, Kiss Alive, Rock and Roll Over, Love Gun. None of them. There's no connection at all, other than they were Kiss albums. I mean, it was even to the point as a kid in the 70s, you looked forward to the Kiss albums, not just for it being a new release, but you wanted to see what the artwork was going to be like, because you had no idea. I mean, because if you looked, like I said, just even at the first 3 or 4 albums, what connection is that? And we truly loved Kiss Alive because you could open it up and you had your 4 letters from the band members. Then you could pull out the sheet on the little insert on the inside, and then there were some concert photos. So if you were fortunate enough to see the band then, and other people hadn't, you'd say, "Hey, look what you're missing out on." So yeah, the artwork was real important back then. But the cool thing was how diverse it was. And yeah, like you said, they might have had some clunkers in there between, but you know, some might even say they're not clunker, because I know people that like Hot in the Shade or the Carnival of Souls cover or something. I mean, or Psycho Circus. I mean, that's the cool thing about the diversity of the Kiss fans. Everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
So, you know.
That's true, that's true. While working on the book, I was thinking, you know, I'm going to talk about the cover and say that people don't like it, and there's going to be people who are going to say, you
But
don't
I
know
like
what you're talking about, because I love that cover.
I love that, right.
And what can you do? But that's the whole point, in a sense, of some of the stuff in the book.
Because that had been a period where they were introduced to the band. You know, like you said, the era that you were introduced to the band as, it's going to mean more to you. I'll never forget getting that first album and how that meant to me, and then getting Hotter Than Hell, thinking,
right.
What the, and then getting Dressed to Kill, and you're like, what direction are these guys going to? I mean, there's this Japanese cover, then they're dressed in suits. What's going to happen next? And then in September, when Alive came out, I just flipped. I said, oh my God, because really, who ever heard of doing a live album in 1970? Right. Nobody. I mean, there wouldn't have been Frampton Comes Alive if Kiss Alive hadn't been out. I mean, you just didn't do live albums.
Right.
So, I mean, for me, that little era was because I saw from the beginning to the end there, or not to the end, but to the top, and those were special to me. So, you know, the album artwork was very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's chapter. It was a chapter when I was asking fans online for responses. I think I got the most response out of it, because first off, everybody had their favorite, but everybody definitely had their least favorite, and everybody wanted to talk about exactly what they hated in that one.
Right, and that's what's cool about the Kiss fans is that stuff. And who's to say who's right? Nobody. It's just your opinion. It's like, I'm sitting here, this is my opinion, you know.
Yeah. Well, let's get back a little bit into something more personal with you here, and that's, when was the last time you saw them? And do you feel a certain kinship with them after all these years, or just pretty much as a fan?
I saw them on a concert 2 years ago on a cold night in Chicago. And then 3 weeks earlier, on a very hot night in Indianapolis, and it was kind of neat. We were at the Indiana State Fair, and I was just happened to be in a line, and they were walking to their meet and greet, and Tommy turned to Paul and said, "There's Bill over there." And Paul broke ranks and walked all the way over to just personally shake my hand, and I just was floored. And you know, the fans behind me just that made it for them as well, you know. And then I said, you know, thanks, and he walked on his way, and then Gene stopped and he bowed and said, "You're the man." And I thought, "No, you're the man. You know, I'm just a fan." and then he walked on, and you know, that made it for me. I mean, I could have cared less what happened the rest of the night, you know. So, yeah, that kind of stuff that happens is great. And you know, they keep a safe distance between themselves and the fans, and that's probably, you know, just as well. But like I said, they know me and I know them, and you know, it's still an honor to still be connected with them 35 years, you know, going. I never dreamed we'd still be talking about this, you know. You know, life goes on. But as long as people continue to want to hear about it, great. So, but yeah, I do feel a certain kinship, and they've influenced me in a lot of different ways. Like I said, not only just with Paul and Gene, but the fact of even though they were rock stars, they didn't act like it, and their work ethic was always influential to me, because I don't feel that they ever do things halfway. They do, people may not necessarily agree with how the thing may end up, but you can't say they didn't go into it full, 100%, because that's what they wanted to do. So yeah, their work ethic's always been influential to me. Their attention to detail. It helped keep them around for a long time, and I like that too, because I'm able to show my nieces and nephews, what it was about, and that's, because I've had goofy people tell me, man, I wish I was back in the 70s. I'm like, oh, why? Disco and bad hair and bad clothes. No. But I guess I wouldn't trade a lot of that, because I did see,
the cool bands.
The cool bands, and Kiss was the top of the cool bands, and it was a cultural thing. I mean, you couldn't turn on TV without some Kiss thing,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I definitely enjoy my place in history, and relish it. So.
Okay. Let's kind of start wrapping this up, and this is again something we talk about, or I talk about,
Right.
in the book, and that's to do with Kiss and where we see them in the next few years. I mean, really a lot recently, especially from Paul, we've been hearing kind of hints about things that may happen. He may be winding down from at least his involvement with the band.
Right.
And so where do we see the band in the next few years? Is it going to be like a big blowout, continuing this Kiss 2 thing with new players?
Who knows? I like this question, because who would have thought that there would be such things as a Kiss cruise? I mean, and when it first happened, I thought, no. And now we're doing the second one, and it's maybe an annual thing. So I mean, the sky's the limit. But yeah, I just saw recently, I read a Paul review where I think he was kind of like bracing us for the fact that for his replacement. And all I can say is, for me personally, it would be a hard thing for me to buy, because he's irreplaceable, Gene's irreplaceable, and this isn't to say that Peter and Ace aren't irreplaceable as well, because they have been, but it took a lot of us a long time to get over it. And here's where I think Paul I kind of disagree with him, is I think he's trying to sell us an image that he thinks this Kiss image is bigger than the personalities. And I've never looked at it that way. I like the personalities. I like the Paul personality, the Gene, now I love Tommy and Eric. And a good example that I would have to refute this is to say you have somebody like Bruce Kulick, who has a huge following and had made great contributions to the band. What is Bruce's image then? Because he never painted up. What is his image? Is that to say he didn't have anything to do with the band either? He did. Again, Bruce was a personality as well. It's the personalities in the band that sell the band, not the image. I don't think that they can just put anybody in there and we're going to buy it. Now, of course, if they did something really different, like maybe their Offspring, maybe we might see, Paul son or Gene's son. We Kiss fans would probably go for that, but still, Paul Stanley's irreplaceable. Gene Simmons is irreplaceable. Mm-hmm. And Tommy and Eric are doing their thing too, but I don't look at them as the Catman and the Spaceman. I know them as people as well, and I see them as people. And it's the personalities that move this band, not the images.
Right.
So I disagree. I mean, and I don't know where he's going with this, and I don't know. I have no allegiance to anybody in the band. I've always told people that. That's why I've never painted up or any of that kind of stuff. And I don't have anything against it. It's just I just don't feel like I like the different guys in the band for different reasons, and they're just not replaceable.
I keep getting the impression some fans seem to think that this is going to be like, oh, well, the 4 guys who will do the Kiss show.
If this were the case, if it was just image, wouldn't every Kiss tribute band out there right now be laughing all the way to the bank? And I don't think they are, and that's not anything to put the tribute bands down. They do great. I know some great people. I mean, Mr. Speed and I are real tight.
Yeah.
They're awesome guys, but they work really hard at doing what they are, and if it was just the image, wouldn't the Kiss tribute bands be higher up? Because it's the image too, and they do a good job.
Right. But that's why I keep getting the impression from what Gene and Paul are saying in these interviews, that they're not thinking just along a tribute band level, but a group of guys who are actually doing like new material and stuff like that. And I just don't know if that could work or not.
I don't know. I don't know what they're bracing this for, but you know, it's funny because I really enjoyed Paul's solo tour, and I thought to some degree he would probably say that's different than Kiss, but I thought it was Kiss, but it was a different side of Kiss that I enjoyed. I mean, and I really thought that was cool. A lot of the numbers that they did, a lot of the way they did it, the keyboards, the band. I mean, to me, it's always been about the music. We didn't start the Kiss Army. We didn't start the Kiss Army because they wore costumes. We didn't start it because of the pyro. We started it because of the music. It was getting the music on the radio. And so I guess image wasn't that big a deal to us. So, you know, I don't know. I don't understand it, but let's hope not. You know, I mean, Paul McCartney's what, 70 now? I mean, so you know, we got 8 to 10 more years of this. I mean, Kiss is inspirational in other regards for me in this way. And I'm 55 years old, and when I have trouble getting up out of bed, oh God, I don't want to go to work today. I'm thinking, well, you know what? They probably don't want to have to go to tour either again, and they're on a real strenuous tour right now. Hey, they can do it and still look good doing it. Yeah. Why shouldn't I be able to go do my job? You know.
Well, we started off talking about Kiss and Image, and I think we ended up talking about Kiss and Image. So I think it's a good place to kind of wrap things up.
Okay.
As we said before, this is to do with the Kiss Back book, which is out in stores and online through the stores there, and brick and mortar stores, of course. And it's 356 pages of different kind of topics that fans like to talk about but don't get a chance to really see covered in other places. And of course, Bill wrote the introduction and talked a little bit about how the Kiss Army really came about, and I appreciate you coming out here and talking to me and helping me out with the book trailer as well, no matter how goofy it was.
I was privileged. It was an honor. When it's about the fans and Kiss fans, hey, I'm all for it. You know, so thanks for being a part of it, for asking me to be a part of it.
But thank you.